my name is Taylor Marshall. This is my online observation presentation for Introduction to Teaching in Professor Vaughn's class. This is my observation presentation. Some things that my school that I went to Northside Elementary in Cabot, Arkansas, and it's located kind of in the middle of town. It's on the north side of Cabot. The name of the teacher, I observed first grade in the elementary school. I observed Miss Niece's first grade classroom, and something that I think you should know about the school had about a 60% student turnout on free to reduced lunches, and that was something I thought was very interesting. I thought that was a pretty high number for the school to have, but so about 60% of the students were on free or reduced lunches. Some things that I wanted to talk about today about with my glows and my grows were the seating arrangement. Something that I really liked about the seating arrangement in Miss Vaughn's classroom was she sat everybody like boy, girl, and it seemed to be a very dynamic thing that came together and worked very well for these students. She also sat the students with lower test scores or did worse on the state test. She sat the students that had lower test scores with the students who had higher test scores, and that was something else that I thought was very interesting, and it seemed to actually help a lot of those students from my firsthand experience. A lot of them were arranged in a way that they would be inclined to talk to each other, and that was a big problem in this classroom, where these students were always talking to each other and she had to constantly get on to them. She wasn't really about, she disciplined her students, but she wasn't about going to an extreme level where she would go out of her way to just I've never seen her separate any of these students, is what I'm really trying to say here, and a lot of these students could have benefited from being separated. And I even heard the teacher on multiple occasions tell me that she should separate a few students, and she just never got around to it. So that was something that I thought she could possibly grow on. Other than that, the seating arrangement in the classroom, it was very thought out, well planned, and I think she did a very good job at seating her students. As far as the classroom management went, something that I really liked that she did to manage her classroom was using this Dojo app that she uses a disciplinary tool for her students. The Dojo app was basically this app that parents and teachers downloaded, and the teacher would keep up with it on their phone all day and award students points and take away students points based on their behavior and what they've done throughout the day. And students were more inclined to do better in school when they realized that they were getting points taken away from them, and that was being reported directly to their parents. Because that was something that was I thought was very interesting about this, was the parents get the results almost immediately, and as soon as their child comes home from school, they can talk to their child about the results, or even give their child like treats or prizes when they do well in school. And so it was a really big motivator for these students in this classroom. Something I thought that this classroom could grow on, there was not a whole lot of real repercussions when a student acted out. I never saw a student go to the principal's office or get in any kind of extra write-up besides on this Dojo app. And that was the only thing that I thought she could grow on, but other than that, she had a pretty good handle on her students, and they did have some behavior issues, and there were a few students in particular who were not necessarily issues, but they weren't the best that they could have been, and this Dojo app didn't really do a whole lot to affect their behavior in particular, but the rest of the students it did. So that was something I thought this classroom could grow on, that just more repercussions depending on what these students do, because I've just seen some crazy behavior from these students that just did not get handled in any kind of way. But again, I really enjoyed this Dojo app. During parent-teacher conferences, she has a report that she gives to the student, she has a report that she gives to the parents, and it tells all of the good things that the student got points for. It even has it's a pie chart, and it has specific examples of why they got points, and I thought that was something that was really neat because they could see what their child was really improving on. And then when they got points taken away, it also had specific examples of why they got those points taken away, like they were talking or they were misbehaving or not listening to the teacher or something like that. So that's what I liked about her classroom management. Something that I really liked about her classroom learning, it wasn't necessarily just this classroom, but the entire school as a whole. When I started first doing my observations at Northside Elementary, the entire classroom and the entire school were reading this book called The Chocolate Touch. All of the grades, kindergarten through 4th, were reading this book called The Chocolate Touch. And every Monday morning in the office, they had a table of prizes that the students could see when they walked past the glass, and it had just different baskets and chocolate and like special edition books of the Chocolate Touch. And every morning, all of the students, the office would make an announcement and ask everybody a question from the reading that the students were supposed to do over the weekend, and the students would write down their answer on a piece of paper and then turn it into the office, and the office would pick winners from each grade. And so that was something that I thought was very cool about this school, is that they all came together to do this unique little activity that motivated the students to read this book over the weekend. Something I thought it could grow on was there weren't any textbooks that the students were using. They were in first grade, so I didn't really expect them to be using textbooks, and I didn't use textbooks when I was in first grade. But she did not use textbooks. She used this one textbook that she was actually using as a trial run for the entire school. It was a phonics textbook, and it was a certain way to teach vowels and word sounds to the students, and they would she just read along with them in the mornings every time that she went over this lesson, and she was reading in the book, and she would read the book to the students, and they would all do what the book says, like clap for these words or stand up and do something for these words. But she was the only teacher in the entire school using this book, so other than that, she didn't use anything else. She had an array of textbooks behind her desk in her classroom, and they were all labeled differently. They all said something math or English lessons, and it was just like a set of she also had sets of worksheets and things like that to help her throughout the year. But my teacher that I observed had also been teaching for 12 years, so she had a lot of resources and information piled together over her years of teaching. Something I thought this classroom could grow on, or my next point, classroom learning or learning activities, my glow on this was during St. Patrick's Day and all throughout Black History Month and all kinds of things. They were always doing multicultural learning things, and they would, during St. Patrick's Day, she would read them a book every day of the week, and every day of the week had something to do different from Irish culture. And during Black History Month, it was a book every day about Black history culture, and she just was very adamant about doing reading these different books to these students around these holidays, and did a very well job at keeping up with these holidays and teaching the students what it really means to celebrate these holidays in different cultures and everything like that. And so that was something I really liked about learning activities in her classroom. She also had visuals for the analog clocks when they started to learn how to tell time. And I worked with a few of the students who were using these analog clocks, and I really enjoyed working with the analog clocks that she had. They were easy to use, and they were easy for the students to use, and they enjoyed using them. They also did this caterpillar activity in their science class, where these caterpillars, she actually took this idea from the school that she moved from, Jacksonville to Cabot, and all of her other teachers had never done this before, and they all started doing it when she showed up. And it was just this little, it was a store that you bought these caterpillars from in this like cylindrical container, and they grew in there, and the students were able to keep a log in their books, a log that pretty much track the growth of the caterpillars, and I thought that was very interesting because that's something I didn't get to do as a child either. And it was very fun to see how excited the students were to see the growth of these caterpillars and the development that they had. And being able to see it firsthand was something really cool besides just reading a book, you know. Something I thought that her learning activities could grow on is there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of group work. It was only when she was doing her centers did the students have different groups that they worked together, and sometimes even in the groups that they were supposed to do things in, they weren't supposed to work together. Like the technology group, while she was doing her centers, the technology group weren't allowed to talk to each other. They were supposed to work on what they were working on the tablets or computers, and that was basically the extent of the group work. And then journals weren't allowed to work together. They had a certain assignment written on the board when they were in groups to do their journal activity, and they weren't supposed to talk to each other either. One of the only actual groups were the analog clock group. It was students who were learning how to use the analog clocks, and they were allowed to talk to each other and collaborate together to learn what time was what, and they even played a little game, and it was really cool. But that's something that I thought that her classroom could grow on, was a little bit more of group work in her class. The classroom climate, something that I really liked about the classroom climate, it was Miss Neese had a lot of emotion in her storytelling, and she made the kids really want to listen. It wasn't like anything I've ever really seen before. Students I've observed at other schools didn't necessarily want to listen to the teacher, or zoned out, or started talking or playing around with their friends when a teacher started reading a book to them, especially when they didn't know what the purpose of the book being read to them was. But Miss Neese just had a way in her voice and emotions and telling her stories, and she loved books, and she had books all over her classroom, a huge library for the students to pick from in her own classroom, and I really like that about Miss Neese's classroom, and she loved teaching, and it was a very comforting thing to walk into her classroom to a teacher who just genuinely loved her job. Something I thought that the classroom could grow on as far as the climate went was the students acted out a lot, and it caused a lot of tension between Miss Neese and the students because of the fact that she didn't necessarily had a lot of repercussions besides the dojo app that she used, and so she just kind of let them talk down to her sometimes. She wouldn't necessarily let them disrespect her, but she would let them get out of hand and then not do something about it, and it would cause tension between her and her students, and it just kind of made everything awkward in the room. But it wasn't a whole lot, and it wasn't definitely every day that I was there, and for the most part it was a very happy, friendly classroom, and all the students were mostly happy to be there. Something that I thought that was a glow to the students resisting learning was that she reported one of the students named Ava one day was telling me that she was going to break her hand because she wanted to go home, and I thought that was a little extreme, and I told Miss Neese about it, and Miss Neese's first reaction was to text the parent of the student and tell her what was going on, because I guess the student has had problems in the past doing the same thing, and so she reported this extreme behavior to the parent of the student, and the student ended up getting picked up from school, which is something that Miss Neese actually stated to me that she didn't want the parent to come do, because that's exactly what the student wanted, and the student was getting her way by the parent doing this. But she did report this extreme behavior, and so that was something that I liked about the whole students resisting learning in her classroom. And something I thought this was my biggest grow out of all of these subjects for my observation was there was a student in her classroom. It was a male student, and she informed me that he was taking medication, and I don't know what he was taking medication for, but he had some kind of ADD or hyperactivity disorder. I'm not sure what it was exactly, and for some reason on Mondays he acted out worse than every other day of the week. And so one Monday I came in, and it was the question on the board when they were working in their journal groups was adding doubles, 1 + 1, 2 + 2, 3 + 3. and he was doing okay until he got to 12 plus 12 and 11 plus 11. And then he started resisting my help and resisting Mrs. Neese's help. And it was, he threw a full out tantrum on the floor and was crying and putting his head down and kicking his feet because he didn't want to answer the question, and he just kept repeating over and over he didn't know how. And no matter how many times me and Miss Neese tried to explain it to him, I even wrote down some tally marks and asked him if he could count them for me, and he just kept on saying no, and he was just resisting everything about the whole lesson. And that was something I thought this could grow on, because Miss Neese never really did anything to absolve the problem. She kind of let him have his tantrum, and that was it. And after that, they went to lunch, and he came back, and they started their next lesson. So that was something that I thought that this classroom could grow on. As far as her teaching approach goes, she used a constructivist approach. She incorporated her ideas into teaching, and she picked her own, and she let her students pick their own writing topics. That was just an example of how she incorporated this approach into her everyday classroom, is by letting her students pick their own writing topics, and basically picking their own topics every time they had any kind of writing lesson or anything like that. And I really enjoyed the way that Miss Neese taught. I thought she had a beautiful teaching approach. The only thing I was concerned about was the behavior problem in her class, but something I really liked. My grow on this one was kind of my grow a while ago. There wasn't a lot of group work, and that's something that a constructivist approach really has incorporated into it, is group work, and she didn't have any group work in her classroom, hardly at all. Finally, I really enjoyed conducting my observations in this classroom. I really believe that I learned a lot from her, from Miss Neese. She was a great teacher. Her students loved her. She encountered her own problems, but that's something that every teacher encounters, and I know I as a teacher, I'm going to encounter those same problems, and I'm going to have to face them in my own way, in whatever way works best for me and whatever way works best for my students. And I think that it's just something that Miss Neese was, she cared very much about. She always wanted her students to succeed, and she was even when their state testing was coming up, she was concerned for each individual student, especially those who had problems, staying on task and answering questions by themselves when she wasn't there to guide them 24/7. And so that was just something I really enjoyed about Miss Neese, and she was a great teacher. She was very friendly and inviting, and very easy to work with, and I just loved observing in Miss Neese's classroom. And that is the end of my observation presentation. Thank you.